Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the I'm Not Crazy podcast. Cameron Jones here, along with my co-host,
Nicole.
I wanted to jump topics today and talk about something that's kind of been parallel, pun intended, to what we've been talking about. I want to talk about parallel universes and cases where maybe these parallel universes have collided with our own.
Okay.
So we've talked heavily about the science, about time in our last episode with soothsayers. Go back and see our soothsayers or future tellers. Mm-hmm. And again, I'd like to touch on some of the science here just because I think it's a good base. It's fun. It's fun for me. I like the science.
Okay.
So a parallel universe, also known as an alternative universe, parallel world, parallel dimension, or alternate reality, is a hypothetical self-contained plane of existence, coexisting with one's own.
Okay.
The sum of all potential parallel universes that constitutes reality is often called a multiverse. Terms we're kind of
Spider-Man.
terms we're familiar with now because of action movies, thankfully. So familiar terms here. That's all.
I mean, the best way that I could do is just
Spider-Man. You know, we've all seen
Spider-Man.
We've seen Spider-Mans.
Yeah.
So multiverses and parallel worlds are often argued in the context of other major scientific concepts like the Big Bang Theory, string theory, and quantum mechanics. All things we've touched on in our time episode a little bit.
Right.
So sorry for people that did listen to that episode, but I'm going to do a little bit of a look back and a little refresh on some of the science we've talked about.
Okay.
So around 13.7 billion years ago, everything we know of was an infinitesimal singularity. Then, according to the Big Bang Theory, it burst into action, inflating faster than the speed of light in all directions for a tiny fraction of a second. And this is going to be the important part that we're talking about.
Okay.
The universe had exploded outward to 10 to the 26 times its original size in a process called cosmic inflation.
Okay.
Inflation theory explains what happened in the tiny fraction of a second before the Big Bang, so before the actual giant explosion that created all matter and particles.
Okay.
Everything that we know was one tiny subatomic speck. Then that speck inflated faster than the speed of light in all directions. And as that inflation slowed, a flood of matter and radiation appeared, creating the Big Bang fireball that allowed the formation of atoms, molecules, and eventually stars and galaxies to be pulled together. Yes.
Basically come together.
So the Big Bang. So this expansion...
I think I hit my mic too.
Oh, you
I'm
totally
sorry.
did. It's fine.
Sorry.
So the inflation theory is just talking about that tiny second right before the Big Bang theory. The end of inflation is triggered by a quantum process that occurs at different times in different places. So this is what's important and maybe makes the idea of...
So essentially like things coming together, combusting, and then coming back together?
No. So right before the Big Bang happens,
Okay.
there was a super fast expansion. But almost think of it like throwing water on a pan or something. It'll flow out, then eventually it'll kind of like cease in areas and form like little patterns, right?
Yeah.
So that's what it's doing with that tiny fraction of a second. It's spreading out super fast, but it's closing off in different areas separately.
Okay.
But in each of those closed off areas, they theorize then its own separate Big Bang is happening, and then that's its own separate universe.
Oh, okay.
So as that expansion in that tiny fraction stops, it's creating little pockets.
Okay. Thank you. I just needed a visual. I was like trying to imagine it.
I'm going to try to now read the science of this, but that's essentially what's happening.
Okay.
So the expansion slows at different times and places throughout the universe. The regions where inflation ends are thought to pinch off into a bubble universe. So like that water analogy, as it kind of forms off into its own shapes, those would be their own universes.
Okay.
The end of expansion is essentially pinching off into its own universe or reality in this theory. The bubble universe experiences a similar Big Bang and may form a universe like ours, or it could be, an entirely different thing.
Okay.
So our universe is ever expanding and continue to grow. We've always heard this, right?
Right.
But this is separated from the process of inflation. This is different. That is just the super fast expansion that precedes the Big Bang theory.
Yeah.
But still within our own bubble universes, it's continuing to grow and expand outward. So because of this, people theorize that no two bubble universes could ever connect because they're just continuing to kind of expand outward and roll kind of up against each other.
Okay.
So unfortunately,
is that where we're coming up with the parallel kind of? Because they're rubbing up against each other. So there's some similarities, but they're still...
Well, it's just they're still just pinching off.
Just
and,
I'm just doing
they're still just pinching off into their own different universes. It's just in this theory, we could never see or experience those universes. They'll never cross paths.
Okay. So nothing will bleed into another in a sense.
No, and unfortunately also that means this is kind of an untestable theory as well. That's some of the problems right now with all these theories with parallel universes. We don't have a way to test any of these. So,
Okay.
So as I was saying, these bubble universes could never contact each other because we could never go faster than the universe is expanding, essentially, to cross that barrier.
Right.
Some researchers base their ideas of parallel universes on quantum mechanics, the mathematical description of subatomic particles. In quantum mechanics, multiple states of existence for tiny particles are all possible at the same time.
Okay.
A wave function encapsulates all those possibilities. However, when we actually look, we only ever observe one of those possibilities. So we've talked about this a lot, and that was kind of a rushed explanation, but essentially there's an experiment where a particle will either act like a wave or it'll act like a particle depending on if it's being observed or not.
Okay. So it could change forms?
Yes.
Okay.
All based on observation. So it's kind of like based off that everything's possible at the same time, giving the many worlds theory a possibility. Yeah, so I'm sorry again. I am rushing some of the science on this one, but go back and see our time in all of our previous episodes because these are concepts we've talked about several times. So this is the many worlds theory instead of your parallel universes, which states that every time an outcome is observed, there's another world in which a different quantum outcome becomes reality. So every time you're like, should I eat this apple or not? You put it down. There's a universe where you did eat the apple, essentially.
Okay.
Every choice will splinter off into a never-ending web of every possibility.
Okay. Cool.
Those alternate universes are also completely separate and unable to interact in this for some reason. We just can't see those.
Okay.
So while there may be uncountable versions of you living a life that's slightly or wildly different, you'll never access or see or know about it. But I do kind of like...
But what about deja vu, though?
I don't know.
Would there be a theory that could be just...
I feel like some of that will get into more like the Akashic records and like the what do you call the one mind theory? Collective consciousness, like a collective consciousness thing. I think there's some of that in play.
Okay.
But I do kind of like this multiverse because essentially every single plausible outcome for Cameron will happen. Granted, a lot of those might be bad, but everything good will happen to me too. I'll experience everything.
I know. Wouldn't it be crazy if you could see that, though?
Yeah. Well, or horrific in maybe some aspects.
I would like to know.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
So one of the problems is that the many worlds idea is not really falsifiable. So same as the last one, it's an important component of scientific thought, and it is the way that the scientific community develops ideas that can be explored with observation and experimentation.
Okay.
But if there's no opportunity to find evidence against the theory, that's kind of bad for science as a whole. We can't test it at all. So that's the biggest problem, like I previously said, with the other theory. Same with this.
You just can't prove it to be true.
And here's kind of the third or the other more popular parallel universe theory. Some physicists believe in a flatter version of the multiverse universe.
Are these flat earthers?
No. Just a more basic idea of it.
Okay.
So if the universe that we live in goes on forever, there are only so many ways that the building blocks of matter can arrange themselves as they assemble across infinite space.
Okay.
So eventually, any finite number of particle types must repeat a particle arrangement. So hypothetically, in a big enough space, those particles must repeat arrangements as large as entire solar systems and galaxies, or as small as like you or me or an ant. So they're theorizing that because the universe is ever expanding and it's so vast,
right,
there are only so many mathematical formations for particles of matter to form that eventually it's going to start repeating itself, so that there just will be copies of our solar system like Earth. And on there could be a Nicole on there because, I mean, eventually mathematically, if we're just keep repeating molecules and patterns, there might be just another you out there.
Okay, interesting.
So this is a little less on like every choice you make as a decision or like the pinch off bubbles. This is something that we could travel to. This is more interesting because theoretically, if we had interstellar travel or some sort of portal, we could just go far enough that we could find another Earth with another you on it and talk to that person.
Wild.
So before we get into actual cases of parallel universes, and by actual cases, I mean kind of some of the more popular internet folklore you've seen, because once again,
I love internet folklore, though.
that's all I got. It's just folklore stories. I want to talk into some other topics we've mentioned, how they might be in play here.
Okay.
So essentially what I was just mentioning. We talked about the Akashic records, which are believed to be the records of all activity in the universe.
Right.
As well as the collective consciousness.
Yep.
The idea that we are all part of one consciousness, one being. And we've come across people in past episodes who have said to have been able to access these sources with their minds.
Right.
So could there be something to this? Because apparently we can't access these parallel universes at all, and yet people are claiming to have seen or had flashes of things.
Okay.
In the 70s and 80s, a theory was developed that stated the consciousness could be modeled as its own universe. So as if one could master its own mind map, the ability to control the chaos and the possibility to travel to other dimensions could be achieved.
Okay.
So this is just kind of the idea that controlling the matrix and controlling your mind, you could be able to astral project and travel to all these other dimensions and worlds and across space. Thoughts on that?
The opposite of past life regression, essentially.
It's astral projection, just in sense, if we meditate and we go deep enough within, we can, within our minds, access anywhere. We gotta start meditating more.
Yeah, it wouldn't be bad for me.
And we've talked a little about astral projection in other episodes. Go back and see that. And at some point, we will get into some other government mind programs that do mind exploration. But could that possibly be how all these planes are being accessed, just through the mind?
I mean, it could be possible.
If anything,
the mind is capable of so many things.
Of anything.
Truly.
Or you're just hallucinating stuff. Either way, but I think that's probably the answer. Go within.
Yeah.
But whether or not you believe in the concept of parallel universes and copies of yourself existing somewhere out there, there have been peculiar cases that I've come across that would suggest that parallel universes are not only possible, but occasionally intertwining with our own.
Okay.
So after
touch base on them.
Well, we were gonna, but after after all that information, do you have any certain belief as far as like what parallel universe you would subscribe to existing? Is it the pinched off bubble universes? Is it that every decision creates a new universe, or is it the?
I think that every decision creates like a new universe.
That's the one I like the most.
Yeah, that's the one that I'm leaning towards.
Although theoretically, mathematically, I mean, the never-ending universe and just particles repeating is probably the most likely, at least existing.
You think so?
I don't believe like another Cameron's me out there, but there's probably there's probably been a couple doppelgangers on some like kind of Earths that have lived similar-ish, but no one can replace me. But you believe in parallel universes?
I feel like we're all
existing?
expendable.
What?
Sorry.
What's going on in your mind right now?
No, like, I don't know. A lot of things. We won't talk about it. Just carry on with what you're talking about.
Okay. Do you want to get into the fun internet stories now, the folklore?
I love the folklore.
Up first, the man from Torrid.
Okay.
Have you heard about this one?
Possibly.
This is the most popular one that's circulated on the internet, and I've heard a few different versions of the story, but here is the most popular version I found on the internet.
Okay.
It goes like this. It's July 1954, a hot day. A man arrives at a Tokyo airport in Japan. He's of Caucasian appearance and conventional looking, but the officials are suspicious. On checking his passport, they see that he hails from a country called Torrid, spelled Taured.
It's not real.
It's not real. The passport looked genuine, except for the fact that there is no such country as Torrid, at least in our dimension. The man is interrogated and asked to point out on a map where his country is supposed to exist. He immediately points his finger towards the Principality of Andorra, but becomes angry and confused.
Yep.
He's never heard of Andorra and can't understand why his homeland of Torrid isn't there. According to him, it should have been, for it had existed for more than 1,000 years. Customs officials found him in possession of money from several different European currencies. His passport had been stamped by many airports around the globe, including previous visits to Tokyo, so it had worked. Baffled, they took him to a local...
Was there ever a stamp from his country?
That I don't know, but yeah, you still need to get stamped when you come back in. Yeah, I'm not too sure about that. Baffled, they took him to a local hotel and placed him in a room with 2 guards outside until they could get to the bottom of the mystery. The company he claimed to work for had no knowledge of him, although he had copious amounts of documentation to prove his point. The hotel he claimed to have a reservation for had never heard of him. The company officials in Tokyo he was there to do business with had also never heard of him. Later, when the hotel room he was held in was open, the man had disappeared. The police established that he could not have escaped out of the window because the room was several floors up and there was no balcony. He was never seen again, and the mystery was never solved.
Joke's on them. He was hanging out on the ledge.
No, it turns out, so this is based on a true story, but it's greatly embellished.
Is it really based on a true story?
Yeah, I'd go as far to say it's a lie. They took a story and they lied.
Okay.
So a man was charged for falsifying documents and did get arrested in Tokyo, but he did not disappear. So
Okay.
his name was John Allen Kuchar.
Wait, is this the guy that was using someone else's passport and claiming that it was his own?
Nope, this is a little more creative.
Okay.
His name's John Allen Kuchar Zagris. No relation to Ashton Kutcher that I know of.
Future.
So Mr. Zagris wanted to travel around the world, but he didn't have the ability to do so. I'm guessing he just wasn't allowed to travel, maybe for legal reasons or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But to fool officials, he invented a nation, a capital, a people, and a language. All these he recorded on a passport, which he made himself.
Stamps too?
Yeah, everything. The whole thing was forged. He was, well, no, not all the stamps.
Well,
Sorry, not
you
all the
know-
stamps, because he did get entry to these places.
Okay.
So all these he recorded on a passport he made himself. He was successful with this fake passport and was able to travel for some time without question. John claimed to be a naturalized Ethiopian and on an intelligent case for Colonel Nasser. So he's going big with his lie. Maybe keep it more simple.
Okay.
The passport was stamped as issued at Tamaracent, the capital of Torrid, south of the Sahara, all of which he invented. So all this came to an end when the Japanese in Tokyo in October 1959 found John Allen Kuchar Zagris, 36, had entered Japan with his Korean wife. And then 3 months later, he was actually arrested by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police, suspected of identity fraud. He tried to cash a 200,000 yen check and a 50,000 yen traveler's check at the Japanese Chase Manhattan Bank. And then he also tried to withdraw 100,000 at a Japanese bank of Korea. So he was trying to move some big money there. He ended up getting sentenced to 1 year in prison, though, for all this.
1 year?
Yeah, not too bad. It takes a sadder turn. He did try to unalive himself in prison and kind of spiraled mentally. But the story was picked up by newspapers, and they just embellished and lied and just made a mystery out of it. Isn't that crazy?
That's so much work.
Yeah, I know.
Like a lot of work to come up with a whole new country, create a passport, come up with an entire language.
Why not just cross the border illegally? I mean, I guess he's still. I guess he's going on the book. He's on paper, but even though it's illegal, I mean, there's something to be said about that.
So much work and so much effort.
It's a lot. It's kind of a lot.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
But I wanted to at least put a stamp on that one. That is the parallel universe story you hear all the time.
God damn it, Kuchar.
On the internet, but it is slightly based in reality. It's just all the mystery part of it is not. Okay. So a lot of the rest...
Still crazy.
Yeah. So a lot of the rest of these are kind of just social media posts and replying to forums and stuff. But this one's fun. Lorena Garcia of Spain.
Okay.
So Lorena Garcia posted her comment on July 16, 2008, in response to an article about the possibility of multiple universes. She said she was 41 years old and had experienced something so bizarre, so unexplainable, that she worried others would think she was suffering from a psychotic break.
Okay.
Understandable.
Yeah.
And yet her story was so compelling, it became something of an urban legend online. And I had heard this one before too. Her claim is this. She had gone to sleep one night and woke up the next day to find that the world around her had changed in the strangest and subtlest ways. The first change was a very simple one. The sheets on her bed were different. This confused her, of course, but she didn't give it much thought. Not in the beginning, at least. It was another change when she arrived at work later that day that caused her to truly question her reality. When I got to my office, it wasn't my office. It had names on the door, and mine was not. I thought I had the wrong floor, but no, it was mine. I got off at the wireless area of my office and looked. Still working here, but it was in another department, reporting to a director I didn't know. Trippy, that would bother me. Garcia told him she was sick and headed out, determined to understand what was happening. She did what anyone would likely do in her situation. She visited a doctor and later a psychiatrist. I'd probably do that pretty quick.
Yeah.
They did tests, but found nothing. She was clean. Apparently everything was fine. The psychiatrist suggested that perhaps she was suffering from stress and had hallucinated these inconsistencies.
I mean, reasonable.
Possibly, yeah. But no, she thought. The changes were too bizarre, too real. It was the world, and the world was the problem, not her.
That's what I tell myself all the time. It's the world's problem. It's not me.
You're not going crazy.
No, it's everyone else.
And it was only getting worse. While the small things, like her ID and her house and yesterday's news headlines were the same, her personal details were not. For example, well, at least she didn't, like, it would suck if you, like, were just in the wrong address, because knowing me, it would take me so long to find the house again if I had to figure out, like, where I was living.
You're like, all of these look the same.
Oh, dude, I'd be so screwed. I would never get back.
No. Okay.
So while the small things like her ID, her house, and yesterday's top news lines were the same, other personal details were not.
Okay.
For example, she remembered her sister having surgery on her arm, but the rest of her family, including her sister, didn't remember it. Most shocking of all was that she found herself still with her ex-boyfriend, who she remembered leaving many months before.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
Her new boyfriend was gone altogether. This part's a little interesting, though. I left and started a relationship with a guy in my neighborhood. I know it perfectly. I've been with him for 4 months and know his name, address, where he works, where he studied. Well, that guy doesn't exist now. It seems that he existed before my jump, but now no trace. She even went as far as to hire a detective, but he turned up nothing. So her new boyfriend never existed in this universe, it seems. And her ex was still acting as if nothing would happen. What would you do? Would you say anything to your ex and break up with him again, or would you just be like, I guess we're dating?
I would break up with him.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Sucks for that guy, kind of, though.
Yeah, it'd be like out of the blue. It almost reminds me of like someone out at work. They would ask this question, and I feel like it kind of correlates to this. How many owls would it take for you to realize that someone's placing owls in your home?
Like owl sculptures or like real life owls?
It would just be owl sculptures. Let's say owl sculptures.
Immediately, I have none. So the first time one appears, I'm like, where'd that come from? And if you were like, I don't know, I'd be like, we're moving.
No, but you're like alone.
Immediately.
Yeah?
Yeah, I would text you and
That's
be like,
what I said too.
immediately.
And then, that's what I said too. And everyone else at work is like, no, like 3 or 4. And I'm like, what?
I mean, do they already have a bunch of owl stuff in their house? I guess
They said that they don't. But one, because that's not right.
To your point, though, I'm pretty unobservant, so it might take a while for me to notice anything has changed. So
Little owl sculpture in the hallway.
it might take me a second. Okay, so
I would be like, what the fuck? Okay, anyways.
Lorena Garcia ended her post with a simple plea for help. Had anyone else experienced anything similar? She said it was as though she had simply dreamed the previous 5 months, with the fact that everyone remembers me at that time and I've done things that I'm not aware of doing.
Oh, my nose is so itchy. I'm sorry.
You're fine. It just looks like you're picking your nose.
I know. I don't want it to look like I'm picking my nose, but I think I have a pet hair in there.
She searched the internet for similar stories and noticed other important events from the missing months that she didn't remember. But mostly, she wrote, the rest of the world seems to be the same. There's never any follow-up to this, so it was either just a good concocted story or maybe she transported back to her universe. What do you think about Lorena Garcia? Do you think this one's believable or just some good fictional writing on a post?
I mean, it can go either way.
Probably good fictional writing.
It could be good fictional writing, but it would be wild if it was real.
That would be the most terrifying way for this to happen, is just
waking up and being like,
no science behind it, just oh shit.
Yeah.
Just trying to figure everything out on the go.
I would
Good book or movie.
break up with my current boyfriend.
Bummer.
Sorry.
I get it.
You gotta go. And then I'd be like, where's that other guy in my neighborhood?
If he doesn't exist anymore,
It's gonna work out.
I'd have to find out what other changes. There has to be something greater that's changed in this universe
Yeah.
if that guy's just gone, you know?
But aside from like her office being moved, was she like changed? Was her position completely
Yeah,
changed?
different department, different job. Yeah, same company. That would suck. Are you ready for the next one?
Yeah.
James Richards. The Beatles never broke up. So this one's not real. It's just a website that I think it's even called like www.thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com. But this has a lot of...
Which I Googled, by the way. You're wrong. It's not real.
Well, it's something like that. I can find you the website. Just like Google that, though, and it'll probably... If you look James Richards, The Beatles Never Broke Up, it'll get you there. So, James Richard, the one thing that's interesting about this is he put a lot of work into this lie. Apart from making a website to write his story, he created music. So let's get into this.
Okay.
On September 9th, 2009, a man calling himself James Richards claims he traveled to another dimension.
Okay.
There, the ketchup was purple and the Beatles were still together.
There was purple and green ketchup at one point.
We did have that.
Yeah.
His story starts in an isolated patch of the California desert called Del Puerto Canyon. Richard claims that while on a hot pursuit of his runaway dog, he tripped and knocked himself unconscious, kick-starting the most bizarre experience of his life. When he came to, he found himself in an unfamiliar room containing numerous commonplace household furnishings, as well as strange otherworldly electronic machines. Outside, he could hear the hum of traffic, a sound unfamiliar to the lifeless expanse of Del Puerto. So it's supposed to be desert, but now it's metropolis.
Okay.
Richard soon discovered that the room belonged to a man named Jonas. Jonas, it turned out, was from a parallel universe. The account on Richard's website goes on to explain the concepts behind this rather unusual occurrence as a kind of trans-dimensional tourism. It obviously doesn't exist here, but it's supposed to be a fairly common activity where the person Jonas is from. So apparently that's your vacation package. You don't go to Hawaii, you go to 2009 Desert Del Puerto and jump around.
Like Joshua Tree, where people go to, like
Yeah,
the desert.
Less fun. So it was during one of these supposed reality trips that Jonas stumbled across the injured dog walker and decided to take him back to his own universe so that he could bandage up his head. So the main two differences between our dimensions, apart from recreational dimensional travel, is that ketchup is purple and the Beatles are still together. Otherwise, same, pretty much the same. So he tries to prove this on his website by showing a picture of a Beatles album that he stole from Jonas's home that never existed called Everyday Chemistry. Groovy. So what's interesting about this, though, he has 11 tracks of the Beatles album online that you can listen to on YouTube. If you look up Everyday Chemistry by the Beatles, it'll pop up. Experts have listened to it and have concluded that Richards took different elements from various Beatles solo projects and then also mixed together some original instrumentation of his own.
Okay.
But when questioned about this, Richards' explanation was, I had a feeling some of the songs had a familiar sound to them as well. The only conclusion that I can come up with is even though it's an alternative universe, the Beatles hadn't broken up, that didn't mean their future music ideas disappeared. So that's his explanation. Their future projects still would have been the Beatles.
Okay.
So that's it. You can look at this website, James Richard, The Beatles Never Broke Up. You can check out the songs and tell me what you think. But the writing isn't good. Which, I mean, maybe he's just a bad writer, but this one seems pretty unlikely. Your thoughts on James Richards?
Why do people come up with such elaborate lies? Like, why do they put so much effort?
I imagine he gets free domains or websites come very cheap to him, because why would you spend the money and the time? I agree.
There are so many other things that I could spend my time on instead of coming up with this elaborate lie.
I mean, maybe it's real then.
Investing in it.
Maybe that's just because it's real.
You just said it's a lie.
It's definitely a lie. It's totally a lie. The Vanishing Road. Here's another one for you. This one's a little shorter.
Okay.
About 4 years ago, I lived in this fairly small fly speck of a town. At the time, I'd lived there for about 12 years, so I knew my way around. Our house was about 1.5 miles away from the nearest neighborhood. Our mom intentionally picked that house due to the lack of neighbors. Respect that.
Oh, yeah, for
I'd get
sure.
behind
I
that.
would do that.
It was tucked away on a back road, with the woods surrounding it. Every now and again, I liked to take walks with my little brother, who at the time was about 13, and we decided to do just that. We headed up the road and decided to try to find a new path or a clearing that we hadn't discovered yet, when we noticed something a little shocking. Just off the road that led almost directly to the neighborhood, there was a brand new paved road.
Cool.
Yeah, nice. Every road in that part of town was a gravel road, so seeing an out-of-place paved road was pretty unusual. We stared at it for a while and came to the conclusion that it must have been made within the last few days, due to the modern but slow growth of the town. However, we had no explanation for how they did it so fast. We decided to explore it a bit. I remember as soon as we set foot on the road, the air became notably colder, at least 5 degrees. The road itself was black pavement, but no dividing lines. It was surrounded by some thick red trees that resembled redwoods, but they were too short and non-native to our state, southern Arkansas. So we walked on the road for about 3 miles.
Man of geography.
It says
Love
it there.
it. Oh, well, fuck.
I don't just know this.
I thought you did. I was like,
No.
wow, that's pretty impressive.
No, it's in parentheses. We walked on the road for about 3 miles, kind of long,
God, I'm disappointed.
until we decided to head back due to it getting dark. When we got off the road, we felt the temperature go back up. My brother and I agreed to explore it the next day. At roughly noon the following day, we set back out to explore this place, only to discover that the entire road was now missing. When I say missing, I mean the trees that were cleared to make it had apparently
Wait,
grown.
they went down this road and then all of a sudden the road was missing?
The next day, they come back to explore it again, and the road's gone. And this is saying also, the clearing that they had, the trees were back, and there was no sign of those redwood-like trees. They began to explore the woods more thoroughly to see if they had missed it, but they couldn't find it. And when we asked their parents about it, they said they knew nothing about this new road being done near to us. It had mysteriously disappeared. What do you think about this one?
It's a cool story.
Yeah, it seems like a little short story, little jump.
Yeah.
This next one's a little longer.
Okay.
I've seen this one pop up before.
What's it about?
Uh,
Well, besides you're going to obviously tell the story, but just give me a little one sentence. What is it?
a drive into a parallel universe. You'll
Okay,
find that a
cool.
lot of these stories happen like kind of in a transit or a driving somewhere. So possibly going through some sort of gate or
I
Bermuda
like the
Triangle.
spooky element of it.
You're going to like the ones coming up then. These ones are a little more fun.
Wait, there's more?
I've got a few more. I've got like two, 3 more for you.
Okay, cool.
And then we'll wrap it. I got 3 more for you.
Ooh, 3.
So this is about Pedro Ramirez. On November 9th, 1986, at 11:15 p.m., the industrial expert Pedro Ramirez was driving in his vehicle from Seville to Alcalá de Guardia, where he had temporarily resided in Spain. And this might be Guarderia. I'm sorry, my Spanish is a little terrible. And I'm sitting with a native Spanish speaker, so this is terrible that I didn't just talk to you beforehand.
Like Guardia?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Alcalá de Guardia, where he temporarily resided in Spain. According to the account provided by journalist Angel probably
Angel.
Almeida,
Oh boy, you're gonna
I just lost my
struggle
spot.
with this
I lost my
one.
spot. Pedro is a successful industrial engineer, an educated man who is no stranger to bizarre events in his life. So this is where maybe we lose him a bit.
Okay.
At age 17, Ramirez had a UFO experience. Years after the sighting of the unknown craft, Ramirez drove home on a narrow country road running from Sevilla, from Sevilla, where he had gone on a business trip. Sometime after 11 p.m., Ramirez navigated a curve in the road and was shocked when the highway ahead of him suddenly became a wide boulevard, 6 lanes across, 3 lanes in either direction. Having driven the road in the past, Ramirez knew he had not taken a wrong turn somewhere. He also knew that the road shouldn't exist on the route as he had driven. So abruptly, the terrain changed. Huge industrial factories appeared in the distance, and further away, Ramirez made out what appeared to be apartment or condo high-rises. He estimated their height to be about 20 stories. He also noticed thin, tall grass along the greenbelt of the highway. As he drove, the engineer began to experience an unaccountable sensation of rising heat. He thought he heard distant voices. Among the jumble of voices, he recalls he heard or sensed one voice informing him that he had been teleported to another land.
The level of concern I would have with rising heat.
Yeah. Well, I'd be more worried about disembodied voices telling me I'd been transported to a different land. That'd be pretty alarming. To transport me back. Afraid to stop anywhere, like what, same. In this alien countryside, Ramirez kept driving. As he drove, cars larger than his whizzed by in other lanes. Later, he described the cars as appearing like outdated Cadillacs.
Cool.
Every one of them was either white or beige.
Okay.
They had something like license plates, but the plates were dark, narrow rectangles and nothing like the plates issued in Spain. Finally, after driving many miles, he worked up the courage to pull off to the side of the road. According to Ramirez, he explored the roadside. All he could see in the light provided by his headlights was the grassy greenbelt stretching out on the side of the roadway. So just tall weeds. They're non-native to the area. After another hour of driving, he stopped and looked out again. Just more grass. Eventually, Ramirez arrived at a turnoff on his left. He took it. The road and the surrounding terrain changed abruptly. About 30 minutes after turning into the new road, he came upon a sign that pointed for the Spanish cities of Alcabala, Malaga, and Sevilla. Sorry, everybody, I'm butchering this. Sorry also to my sister who lived in Spain is going to be pissed at me.
It's okay. I'm not upset.
Thanks, babe.
Yeah.
Choosing the road that led back to Sevilla, he drove for a short while and then suddenly stopped the car in astonishment. To his immediate left was his home. Later, he described he was unable to find the crossroads that mysteriously led him back home on that eerie night. Nor did he ever find the 6-lane highway again. So while he's driving, he just mysteriously appeared in his driveway. He didn't exactly account for that time jump.
Yeah.
He looked again on a map, but it also didn't appear, and he asked around, but no one had heard of such a highway. Normally, the traveling distance between Sevilla and Alca de Gardia takes about 30 minutes. Ramirez drove for more than 3 hours. He also burned up much more gasoline for such a normal trip.
Interesting.
What do you think about this story? Just creative writing, or do you think this guy
Creative
had a real...
writing.
Yeah, I think most of these probably are. We have 2 more for you, then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Carol Chase McKinley, changing hometown. In early March of 2006, Carol Chase McKinley was traveling to a dog show when she experienced a possible jump into a parallel universe. Rain pounded McKinley's car as she drove from San Bernardino, California, to spend a few days at her sheepdog trial in Paris, California. As she topped a hill south of the city, she saw a road sign for nearby Riverside. Her family had put roots in Riverside in the early 1800s, and she wanted to visit a familiar place, such as her old house and the cemetery where her grandparents were buried.
Fair.
I've been going to Riverside since I was a baby, said McKinley. I'm real familiar with the city. I know my way around. I knew where my grandmother lived, and I'd been to the cemetery. I knew where I was going. As McKinley thought of visiting her grandparents' graves, a chill ran through her. Just as I decided to visit the cemetery, a huge blast of cigar scent entered my car, she said. It was pouring rain, and I had my windows rolled up. My grandpa smoked cigars, and when he died, I was 5, and that's all I remember about him. So maybe a sign, maybe giving her a warning.
Yeah.
Just as quickly as the smell floated through the car, it was gone. She drove past Riverside on her way to Paris, where she checked into a hotel and attended the dog show.
Okay.
The next day, McKinley, so she goes through the dog, so blah, blah, blah. Then she decided to drive to Riverside. She didn't like what she saw. I could not find anything familiar, McKinley said. I used to live there after college. Her street wasn't the same. It was just wrong. The bungalows with small yards looked the same age as her house, and the numbers were right, but her house wasn't there. I could not find my old place, she said. I thought they could have torn down the house and built another house in that 1920s style to fit the architecture, but none of the houses looked familiar. They all looked different. Interesting.
Yeah.
Then she drove down the street where her grandmother once lived, stopped the car, and looked around in amazement. It was totally different, she said. None of the houses were anything like I remembered. No tall trees. Her house wasn't there at all, but the numbers were all in the same range. But the houses were all new. But if the houses were all new, then they could have been torn down in that street.
Yeah.
It's weird that there's older architecture where you remembered, but this is gentrification. Everything was gone. So then she went to the cemetery, where the cemetery was that her grandparents were buried.
Right.
She drove around the block where it was supposed to be, but it was just a fenced-off field with weeds. No gate or driveway or anything. Confused, McHenry pulled down from the empty lot to see if she could find anything familiar. She did. She recognized Riverside Community College and Central Middle School. Some of the other stuff was right, too. The college looked right and the middle school looked right, she said, but when she pulled into University Avenue, things were markedly different.
Okay.
University Avenue was a main drag, and there was a scary-looking people, so I got out of there. She said, I looked for the
There were scary-looking people?
Apparently it just got dodgy, and it just kind of had been run down from what
Okay.
she remembered. Again, I think this might just be changing times and gentrification and your, run down avenue.
Yeah.
So University Avenue had once been home to restaurants, insurance companies, banks, and motels, and now it was completely ghetto. It was all graffitied and deserted. to the point where she was afraid to stop and ask for directions. It was on University Avenue that she realized something otherworldly was happening to her. The thing that occurred to me is that if she got out of the car, something would happen. She said, I thought if I talked to someone, I'd be forever.
Fear?
She thought she'd be forever caught in the weird version, the other Riverside, or that they weren't going to be human. The more places she tried to recognize, nothing matched up and nothing looked familiar. I'd also not exactly want to interact with anybody in these universes just in case.
mean, if you're in a dodgy place, you're not really going to want to interact with anyone anyways.
Yeah. But if I also think I'm in a weird universe, just in case I talk to something and like everything explodes, I don't know. Don't risk it. After a couple of agonizing, frustrating hours, McKinley turned the car around and went back to Paris. Everything was normal, she said. I was afraid I'd go back and the hotel wouldn't be there or my key wouldn't fit.
Okay.
But everything was as it should be. Mm-hmm. A few years later, McKinley's father died, and she was to be buried in the same cemetery as her grandparents. The cemetery she saw as an empty-faced, weeded-off lot was back to what she remembered, she said. He was buried next to my grandparents. Mm-hmm. The rest of the city looked like it did when I lived there after college in the 70s. My cousin was there, and she said her house and her grandmother's house were still there. University Avenue was normal looking, and the Mission Inn was there.
Okay.
She's convinced she slid into another dimension, one that was less friendly. I just got the feeling if I got out of the car and if I talked to someone, I was going to fall off the edge of the earth. I'd end up missing.
What?
She said it must have been a dimensional thing. It looked like it was 2006, but I'd taken a different path. It looked like Riverside had just taken a different direction. What do you think of Miss McKinley's account? Do you think that's real?
No.
No, we don't believe her at all.
No.
Okay, well.
Do you believe it?
No, I don't believe any of these.
You made it seem like you were a believer.
No, I think all these are just people responding to Reddit forums and posts about parallel universes, but
I mean, it's great storytelling.
some of these are just the popular ones that got circulated, so they're good stories. This one I had to abridge a bit because there were a lot of stupid details. The Gaddington Canyon incident. Mm-hmm. 4 girls returning from a Utah rodeo in May.
Fun.
Yeah, never been. 1972 were plucked from this universe and thrust into a world of bizarre terror. Their misadventure began as the foursome motored down Utah Highway 56 on a dark, moonless night, and they approached the Modena Railroad crossing landmark. I'm already just going to say this isn't real because it's a dark, moonless night and it's too fantastical, or at least it's embellished. At approximately 10 p.m., as the 4 students of Southern Utah University drove back to their dorm, they approached the Gaddington Canyon region. Mm-hmm. Legends claim that beyond the canyon was a doorway to another world, an evil dimension of horror and madness that the early Utah settlers avoided at all cost.
Okay.
Anytime there's a don't go there. Just don't drive through it,
Yeah.
Through the years, it was said many wagon trains carrying passengers and cargo became lost in the twisting labyrinth of that horrible place, and anything or anyone that entered its hellish portal was lost forever.
It just sounds like too much.
Yeah, never to be seen again, but they're just driving through. I mean, if it's a big highway, just don't put it through there.
I don't know. I feel like if there's just too much detail, it's a little questionable.
Don't go there.
Yeah.
As the girls approached the Union Pacific rail line, the headlights of their car lit up a sharp fork ahead. The road leading off Highway 56 looked inviting. It seemed to be a more direct route to their dorm. How would they know that? Their landlady was a stickler on curfews, always locked their doors by midnight, and it was already 10:30. What? Oh, just that. How would they know that?
Yeah.
None of the girls relished the thought of arriving late and being forced to sleep in the car. Mm-hmm. The opportunity to take what seemed like a shortcut, although again, it's how would they know it's 72? They don't have GPS. Appealed to them. The mysterious road curved sharply away from the main road towards the direction of the ominous Gaddington Canyon in the distance. So it's going immediately in the wrong direction towards where they shouldn't be going. Turn around.
But it's a shortcut. And it's quicker, Cameron.
They don't know that.
They know that.
Okay. Despite the stories of the canyon, the girls decided to take the road. They chatted happily about the day's events, and as the car wound its way deeper into the foreboding canyon. As they drove, the dark rock walls inched ever closer to the crumbling edge of the thin ribbon of asphalt. So the walls are getting closer to the road. It's narrowing in. Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the way, The road changed from an asphalt pavement to a cracked concrete, so it's just old and not taken care of. Abruptly, one of the girls shrieked, "Look out!" The road suddenly ended at a towering rock wall, so it just ends up against the wall. The canyon just closed off on them. They were boxed in by the canyon and had no choice but to turn around and go back the way they'd come. The 3 girls moaned and complained to the driver. Now they'd all be sleeping in the car. They'd never make it back to the dorm in time because the shortcut cost them at least half an hour of driving time.
Who would have thought?
Everybody, me. As they wound their way back through Highway 56, they left the walls of the canyon behind them and emerged into the countryside again. Several minutes passed before they noticed that the landscape had dramatically changed. Mm-hmm. What was once desolate, windswept desert with dry sagebrush and gnarled Spanish bayonet was now lush fields of ripening wheat under a clear moonlit night.
Sounds beautiful.
It sounds gorgeous, but remember, the moon wasn't there. In the distance, the water of a large lake shimmered, silvery under the bright moon. Sounds gorgeous.
Yeah, it sounds great. I would hang out there.
That sounds awesome.
Sleep out there.
Yet the moon should not have been visible that night. Later, they recalled, at the moment, they'd felt like they'd driven into a different world. The events that follow proved them right. So as they continued onwards, they marveled at all the tall stands of Pondicera pine where no such tree should have existed in this desert. Suddenly, a bright light off the road ahead captured their attention. Now the girls were on edge. They had no idea where they were, and it definitely didn't look like Utah or Nevada. Mm-hmm. Maybe someone could help them point them right the direction so they could get back onto Highway 56 and reach the dorm. Mm-hmm. Approaching the light ahead of them, they discovered it came from a large building, some kind of roadhouse or restaurant, possibly guarded by Jake Gyllenhaal and Conor McGregor. The new roadhouse is out. The place sat in the middle of a large parking lot.
That was a nice plug.
Yeah, thank you. I heard it's terrible. The place sat in the middle of a large parking lot, and a blazing neon sign on the roof spelled out a message. Mm-hmm. At least that's what the girls assumed. But this sign was in a language that they couldn't read.
Of course it wasn't.
The symbols were composed of strangely twisted lines, creating a mosaic of weird curves, a written language unknown to any of them.
Was it cursive?
Possibly, I don't know. They don't seem like the brightest. They just took this shortcut.
That gave them like an extra 30 minutes of travel time.
Without warning, very tall people burst from the roadhouse. Quite a number poured through the front door, spilling into the parking lot. Some of the roadhouse people seemed upset by the girls' arrival. They all waved their arms at the girls. Others shouted and pointed at the girls. Later, the girls recalled that the people from the roadhouse seemed shocked and frightened at the appearance of their Chevrolet driving down the parking lot. As the girls pulled to the parking lot, one of them in the back seat got a good look at the throng of people milling outside the building. Mm-hmm. The girl who got the first good look at the crowd let out a blood-curdling scream. Ah! Like that.
That was blood-curdling, all right.
Thank you. Get out of here, the girl screamed. Punch it! And then the girl in the back seat caught a chilling glimpse of the people moving towards them. And as she
did the girl say punch it, or did the people say punch it?
She did. She said, get out of here, punch it. Step on it, she yelled, too, her voice shaking with fear. Mm-hmm. Burning rubber, the Nova fishtailed away from the strange roadhouse. Now the girls in the rear seat sobbed in terror. They explained to the girls in the front seat what they'd screamed at. The things they saw back at the roadhouse had at first looked like people, but when they got a better look at what was approaching them, it was clear that these things weren't human. Wherever the 4 girls were, they were nowhere near. Okay, they just keep saying the same thing over here. They're
no,
in
it's okay.
place.
Go ahead. Let's read this literary genius.
Then their horror intensified. As they raced through the forbidding night on a strange road, passing the strange lake, intense lights lit up their car from behind. The girls in the back saw the lights of a car coming towards them. Oh my God, they're coming after us! Go faster, faster! Mm-hmm. 4 freakish, egg-shaped vehicles, humming and whining loudly, closed in on the speeding Nova. Each small vehicle had 1 large headlight and 2 front wheels. From what the girls could see, the vehicles only had 1 rear wheel, so it's a trike situation. It's an egg with a trike and 1 headlight. With 1 headlight. You're welcome. Go faster, they're gaining on us, one of the girls in the rear shrieked. The Nova's engine roared as its speed crept towards 80 miles per hour.
That's crazy.
It's crazy, and still the crazy egg-shaped cars pursued them.
Well, I mean, they're aerodynamic at this point.
True. Then the girls were back in the canyon. The Nova's roaring engine reverberated off the sheer rock walls. A rooster tail of dust rose up behind them, and soon none of the girls could spot the whirring egg-shaped vehicles anymore. Mm-hmm. As they flew out of the canyon and into the desert, the road before them had all but disappeared. The car bucked crazily over sagebrush and sand. Although it quickly slowed, the Nova skidded out of control, crashing into the desert sand. The engine died. Although badly shaken, none of the girls were seriously hurt. The car, however, was done for.
Ugh.
So this goes on, but let me sum this up for you. As they were racing away from the egg-shaped things, the road suddenly vanished and they were in the middle of the desert off of the road. So wherever they'd been in their dimension didn't exist, you know? Mm-hmm. I have one more for you. This is our last one. And this one's interesting. This is just a real historical piece. We just don't know who this person was.
Okay.
Joseph or Jofar Voren. Jofar Voren, also Joseph Voren, was a bizarre man who arrived in a small village in the district of Lebas near Frankfurt, Germany in 1850. When the German authorities asked the man where he was from, Voren told them that he was from Laxaria, a country on the continent of Sacria, which was separated from Europe by a vast ocean. According to this man, who was later nicknamed Jofar Voren of Laxaria, he came from the land of Laxaria. So he came from a region called Laxaria in a country of Sakaria.
Okay.
The goal itself, it was to come to the village of Frankfurt to find his long-lost brother. Strangely, though, the man did not know for sure how he had gotten there. But as far as he could remember, his ship had an accident and was shipwrecked, and he was stranded there. So his last memory is his ship in a storm, and it was going under. The ship was getting wrecked. Jofar Voren spoke in a barely clear and halting German. The man didn't seem to speak any other European language except for German. He admits that he reads and writes in a language he calls Laxarian or Abram. According to him, Abram's language is the language of the people of Laxaria. Upon further questioning, he said his religion was Christianity, but it was called Aspartian, or Aspastian, maybe? Meanwhile, investigators search for the place of Voren he's referring to, Laxaria, which is located in the part of the world called Sakaria. Mm-hmm. But the problem is, no matter how hard they search, they can't find it anywhere on a map because it doesn't exist.
Right.
He was then asked to explain further where it was. Mm-hmm. So he then described the 5 great regions of Earth, which he named Sakaria, Aflar, Astar, Aslar, and Uplar.
Those are fun.
Yeah, so essentially it's North America, Africa. It seems like just kind of Asia, Europe.
Yeah.
Author John Timms, who later wrote about Jofar Voren in 1852, his book, The Yearbook of Facts in Science and Art, so he was just writing down science and facts of that year, mm-hmm. a small periodical which was praised for its accuracy by other publications at the time. In his report, Timms provided information that the man was still the subject of many scientific papers in the Prussian capital. One explanation being debated is that he may have been a time traveler who accidentally landed in another dimension and ended up near Frankfurt, Germany. Meanwhile, some others believe that this man actually suffers from fugue, namely a mental condition that makes it difficult to understand, while others see him as nothing more than a fraud. So possibly a fugue state in which his memory is just confusing. It's hard for him to communicate and his brain's a little scrambled. Yeah. Others think he's just a fraud, though, but what are his motives? Mm-hmm. Voren himself never asked for his financial assistance. Luxaria, the country that Voren claims to come from, in Latin means luxury. The names of the continents that he mentions also have similarities with the names of continents we know today, except for Sakaria. Mm-hmm. So Aflar, Africa, Aslar, Asia, Aslar, Australia, and Uplar, Europe. In the history of the ancient world, it turns out there are a few references to a region called Sakaria. This region is now ancient India. But oddly enough, Jofar Voren didn't have an Indian look to him. His physique was Caucasian. The Sakaria area is not only in India, it's in Turkey, which was previously the Ottoman territory. And there's also an area called Sakaria, or known as Sakaria, and the language Voren says is spoken in the place of Abraham, some sort of Abrahamic language, but it's Abranian, is also very similar to the common Armenian name of Abrian, spelled with a Y instead of an I. Armenia is also known as the first country to embrace Christianity as the state religion since 301 AD. Mm-hmm. So there are enough similarities that it could just be a different kind of Turkey area that he's describing. Surprisingly, historical accounts of what happened to Jofar Uporin are then sketchy. Just like the case of the man from Torrid, although that one is totally embellished, it's unclear how the case of Jofar ended, whether he returned to his country of origin or he was detained in Berlin. There's no news about the mysterious man other than his appearance. So no reports of what happened after the interrogation.
Interesting.
What do you think of this one? It's coming from a reputable historical source at the time.
Well, this one sounds kind of fun.
Yeah, this one's a little more believable.
Yeah.
So it's almost like some people do also believe that maybe the man from Torrid was based on, it was just a modern telling of this story, kind of, and they took that guy's real case and just threw that old folklore on it.
I mean, I could kind of see that.
But these were all the main...
But also, people are crazy, and sometimes they do things just to see if they can get away with it, you know?
That's true. But these are kind of the bigger main parallel universe stories, folklore, internet stories you'll find online. Do you find any of them believable? Are any of them true to you?
I don't think any of them are true to
I don't think any of them are true. I think they're just responses to posts, but they're fun. They're good. They're good short reads.
I like that last one the best.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
Next episode, I have kind of a parallel subject that I am also going to be touching on too. It's not parallel universes, but it's people who have mysteriously appeared instead of disappeared.
Oh, that's fun.
Where have they come from?
Yeah.
Time travelers, parallel universes, dimensions.
Oh, I love that.
We'll be the judge in the next episode.
That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so thanks for listening to our take on parallel universes. If you like what you heard, make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate and review, all that good stuff. Make sure to tell friends and family about I'm Not Crazy.
Yeah.
Get them to join our little cult here.
Not cult.
It's a cult.
No.
If you want more content out there, make sure you check out Cult Classics Podcast for movies, Urban Hermit for banter, and the Highwire Podcast for fun music banter news. But until then, we'll check you on the next one.
We're not a cult.
Bye.
Bye.